Hi, everybody. This is John F. D. Taff. I am the multiple Stoker Award nominated author of such works as The End and All Beginnings and The Fearing. I'd like to first thank Sadie Hartman for inviting me to take part in her Celebrate Horror celebrations. And today I'll be reading a selection from a short story of mine that appears in a book called Dark Stars. This is not the actual book. This is the bound manuscript. It'll be out November 2nd of this year from Tor Nightfire. Dark Stars is an anthology that I put together as sort of an homage to that 80s anthology called Dark Forces, edited by Kirby McCauley. It featured stories by Isaac Bashevis Singer and Joyce Carol Oates, and it was the first appearance of Stephen King's novelette, The Mist. It was a pretty important anthology for me. I was young when it came out, the tender age of 17, and it was one of the books that was pretty formative for me in terms of not just becoming a writer, but also becoming a writer of horror. So I've been working on this for the last couple of years, and was able to put together a table of contents. It's pretty spectacular. We've got stories. We got a foreword by Josh Malerman. We've got stories from Caroline Kepnes, Ramsey Campbell, Priya Sharma, Livia Llewellyn, Stephen Graham Jones, Chesia Burke, Al Makatsu, myself, Josh, Gemma Files, Usman T. Malik, John Langan, and Ramsey Campbell, who was also kind enough to write the afterword. So I'm really looking forward for this book to come out. I think the stories in it are pretty incredible, and I hope that it does show my respect for Dark Forces, what came before in Dark Forces. So I have a story in this called Swim in the Blood of a Curious Dream. I stole the title from a line from one of my favorite rock bands, Guster, so thanks, Guster. So I'll read a little bit from that. Swim in the Blood of a Curious Dream by John F. D. Taff. In the end, it was for Gus, not for Hildy, not for myself. I did it because to not do it would be to deprive Gus of the love and experiences of his mother. I did it because what if the shoe had been on the other foot and I was cut off from Gus? I did it because Gus loves us both, no matter the circumstances, no matter the living arrangements. Because, as I've learned, separation doesn't diminish the love a child has for their parents, nor does death. I was exhausted, just wanting to arc into peace and quiet, a crumpled can tossed into the recycling bin, emptied, its purpose fulfilled. Nothingness. But my whole reason for life sat behind me, slumped within his harness, his jacket rumpled and snarled between his sleeping body and the belts that were there to hold him tight, protect him. A Captain America action figure drooped from one limp hand, as if caught in the motion of throwing a shield out into the void of night. Highway lights rippled orange over the car as I drove farther and farther from St. Louis toward our new home, deep in the agricultural flatness of southern Illinois. Far from where I'd grown up, where he'd grown up, at least until this point. No one in the passenger seat. No one had sat there for a long time, not since his mother, and she wasn't sitting anywhere anymore. The dust of her remains had been carried on a gentle wind off the banks of the Mississippi River months ago in a simple ceremony attended by Gus and me and Hildegard's parents. It was a quiet affair, for obvious reasons, but also because I spoke broken German and Gus spoke exactly 4 words: Ja, Nein, and Guten Tag. His favorite, how could it not be, was Nein. His grandparents spoke almost no English, being from a very rural burg in Germany. As little effort as I made to learn German, and it was definitely little, they did zilch to learn English. While I had armed myself with enough German to make sexy pillow time talk with Hildy, it wasn't enough to bridge the gap between me and her parents. Hildy had been that, but it had been a bridge little used from the start. They resented me, and me, for stealing their daughter away to our chaotic, turbulent country, for turning Hildegard into Hildy, but mostly for keeping their only grandchild a world away. I half suspected that they thought America and I had given Hildy the cancer that killed her, or I was at least a willing accomplice. And me? I can't say I resented them for anything in particular. Sure, they skipped our wedding, but because of their dour disapproval, I saw that as a positive. Once we were back in America, we saw them infrequently. I waved at them or said a few broken words in German during Hildy's frequent FaceTime sessions. But when Gus came along, well, they didn't even bother to feign wondering if I was still in the picture. They always seemed angry and alien to me, as foreigners mostly seem to Americans these days. I never wondered why. It was just uncomfortable, shouldering that burden with them, I suppose. Until Hildy, I'd never been the American in the equation. We parted months ago at the airport in St. Louis in a terminal filled with soaring arched ceilings and windows looking up into gray, swirling skies. There were awkward hugs for me, overjubilant kisses for Gus. He and his grandparents clung to each other as the last parts of Hildegard, not eager to separate that connection, make her absence a finality. I doubted very much I'd ever see them again, and I believe they hoped the same. I doubted that they'd ever fly back to America, and Lord knew I wouldn't be booking any extended vacations in Germany. But I'd also never keep Gus from them, from that country, for he was the last part of Hildegard of all of us. He had her eyes, her focused yet buoyant attitude, her honey blonde hair. They saw those parts, I'm sure, just as they overlooked whatever parts of me showed in him. When they were shuffling down the concourse to their gate, two generic old travelers lost in a sea of others, Gus gazed up at me with huge, solemn eyes. His grandmother's too red lipstick blotched his cheeks like a heat rash. "Do you even like them?" I stared down at him, nonplussed. "Who?" I asked, honestly thinking he must be referring to the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or Paw Patrol or Captain Crunch. He was pretty good at random non sequitur questions. "Oma and Opa." That threw me for a loop. I wanted to say to him, "Have you met them? Of course I don't like them." But, again, they were his grandparents. He loved them, so of course I couldn't say that. Not knowing precisely what to say, though, I blinked, squeezed his tiny, sticky hand in mine. We headed home to what had become a structure that felt more concerned with what it had lost than what it still had, whose only remaining purpose was to keep the elements at bay. Or was that just me? Grief has a weight, even a specific gravity, doesn't it? Sorry, I'm a chemical engineer, so it's hard for me to tamp down that side of myself sometimes. But it does, doesn't it? Even on the nothingness around it, grief exerts weight, like a black hole in the fabric of space, pulling everything in with it. From nothingness into nothingness, right? Sorry, I guess that's more physics. But that's what happened. Our grief was a collapsed star, pulling our entire lives into it, crushing it down to its constituent atoms, reducing it to nothing. What was I without her? I honestly couldn't say. When I looked back to my time before Hildy, all I could see was a young man who seldom cared about how he looked, or what was in his refrigerator, if his socks were clean, or even his apartment. The most responsible thing I did back then was make semi-regular payments on my student loan. Was I back to that guy now? Was that who I was without Hildy? And Gus, what was Gus without her? I'm not sure he knew that either, because before Hildy, he was truly nothing. She had literally been his entire reason for existing. So there we were, Gus and I, orbiting the remains of our family, staring into that singularity and seeing absolutely nothing reflected back at us. Wrapped in ourselves, we missed the question that mattered most. What we should have been wondering was simple. What was she now without us? Without him? So that's it. This will be out in November 2nd. Sorry, I had a brain lock there. November 2nd from Tour Nightfire. Follow me on Twitter, John F.D. Taff. That's where I'm most active. And I look forward to talking to you. Hope you like the book. Thanks for checking this out. Thanks again for Sadie. Bye.